I want to take us back to the first time we ever played Metroid Prime.
We're greeted with a deep, distorted red shade. The screen twists either to oblivion or from it, and we can't tell which. Far off in the distance of this embryonic ecosphere, maybe synapses, maybe blood vessels. Gelatinous red bubbles enter from the right. Red blood cells come to mind. At the last leg of our seemingly endless but quick journey, we are sucked into the climax as a gigantic metal S shape fades into frame with what appears to be an armadillo-inspired science fiction insignia. And then, the massive distorted beat drops that you only ever hear in a Metroid Prime game. The trademark whistle sucks you right in with a fright that only the game's opening level can match. The music suggests a titanic amount of interstellar mystery. You can scarcely imagine the technologies, aliens, and locales that the music suggests to your mind. But the eeriness also communicates a dark terror that is only slightly subdued by a technological coolness that tells you that despite how scary your beginnings will be, you can handle it. The game wants you to open its front door. But what sort of game will this be? Pressing enter gives us another vantage point of this organism, and we are immediately invited from an obscure threatening theme to one of monk-like holiness and extraterrestrial serenity. It sounds like future humans that have transcended your story are singing about the planet you will soon explore. But it could just as easily be the sound of aliens singing out into space, helping to create what world this will be in your mind. It feels as if we are inside a brain. In reality, it's likely the brain of a Metroid. It's tempting to ask a question such as, why do we need to be so intimately close to something designed to be so intentionally organic, detailed, twitchy, and frighteningly unpredictable? The first aesthetic of the introductory cinematic is the sharp, classic Metroid Prime font that only an expensive entity would have access to. Slicing into existence, it generates from a ship's computer, one belonging to a certain entity, an anomaly opposed to an archetype. All goes silent. Then, out of a lack of aural stimuli, comes the sound of a deep orchestral bass, emu violins, and a Korg MS-2000. Our eyes fill with the visual splendor of a million stars, tantalizing us with possibilities unknown. Snapping back to our visual senses, we observe the fate of a few asteroids, newly wreathed in flame. Echoing a greater plight, the chill of a twisted, human-like cry combines with the perversion of the alien, piercing our ears as if sung by an Alderanian choir, hoping in their blackened souls that an intergalactic light might save them. This is where our common experience ends. Rather than some hero, we are introduced to a vessel with an interesting color scheme. Undiscerned as evil or benign. In our excitement,
or welcome to a bombastic fanfare for this character. We are now officially Samus Aran. Or Aran, like how I used to pronounce it, but it's Aran. What we find when we dive into Samus's suit is staggeringly immersive and matches well with its exterior. It's surprisingly maneuverable, but convincingly protective. Certainly removed ergonomically and flexibility-wise from NASA's suits. The expansive alien world introduced to us by rocky space fodder is now tremendously massive. It all but engulfs us in its size and massive scars. The surface appears like an orange orb of brimstone. A deep contrast is drawn immediately after our anticipation is released. We are welcomed to a universe of ambience, which immediately begins laboring in our minds for the next surprise to be born. Ahead of us, we can feel the warm presence of the humming force fields and gate locks, but also a seemingly dangerous plunge off the station that many of us were too scared to test at first for fear we'd actually tumble off while jumping around the edges, or while we were trying to scan the gunship. The gray vessel that looks exactly and deliberately designed after an anglerfish becomes a Pandora's box, a convergence point for vengeance against you for every time you avoided Murphy's Law. The vessel's stoic introduction from small piece to massive ship was a solid communication of trepidation. Entering is as simple as shooting a door lock, unassumingly ordained. The first scan inside reveals that the reactor core and propulsion systems are operating at optimal levels. But it's curious that the reactor core, a component of a ship that is typically highly reactive, would be placed in the forefront of our minds. Biohazard research is also fine, mechanically, as far as we know. What becomes immediately unnerving is the final engineering panel scan that informs us that the evacuation area is unstable. We don't know if this means that it's partially destroyed or exposed to space, and it's likely that the evacuation pods will be many corridors away. So this seems like an arbitrary bit of information for our entry point. Then we bust right into the airlock with creatures and debris of unknown origin floating in our midst. The ambience tries to psychoacoustically attack us, and passive-aggressively, it softly assaults our minds as if massive aliens are bending and oscillating the ventilation shafts around us from many rooms down. The room repressurizes. From beneath our feet, parasitic organisms come crawling through the vents. But they're not the size of something you'd expect to shake the very fabric of an entire space vessel. In the next room, we're greeted by what sounds like a mutated alien playing an organ from somewhere within the ship. We see a massive titan of an object, a creature that's torn humanoid creatures asunder. Scanning them reveals the near surgical descriptions of their desecration, that parts of their anatomy had been removed, devoured by this creature of unknown morphology. and genetic enhancement that tears giant orifices in starships. The general first impression of this room for a kid like I was in 2003 created the urge to remain on the stairwell and potentially exit the room. In fact, I vaguely remember taking a small break from the apprehensive atmosphere created by Kenji Yamamoto in Retro by backtracking to the previous hallway. Inside the evacuation area, we find that as many survivors escaped as possible. The escape pods were all jettisoned. All that's left are those parasites, feasting on remains. Our first encounter with a live enemy fits the atmosphere, in that we bear the dilemma of killing a being dying of its wounds, and with the added bonus of a scan that tells us why it's dying. With increasing unease, we clear a debris-filled hallway, the one where a space pirate's head was bashed in by another alien, or by itself, while trying to clear the debris. We get a shot of two parasites entering a small maintenance shaft. For those of us who figure out how to use Morph Ball, we roll up and into the side room. This is our first experience of a tangible reward. And I don't just mean that we can get access to a map of the ship. But we also are given additional lore entries. Golden nuggets that give us specifics about the foreshadowed terrors we will soon face. After descending down a roomy elevator, we come to arcing electricity. If we haven't learned to stop, drop, and roll yet, we are forced to do so here. This is another area of the game that elicits acute anxiety. First-time players have no idea how much damage this will inflict. Once we're past that, we open the door. But at this point, the music comes to the forefront of our minds again, enhancing and being enhanced by the room before us. The giant experiment breathing in a tank is enough. But then we see more wounded pirates. This is when the bell tree type of sound becomes increasingly pertinent. Like hanging glass pulled back as a curtain, revealing the terrors of Orpheon. We come to the scans of the Parasite Queen, a ferocious modification. It's hard to believe that the pirates successfully mutated tiny parasites into these monstrosities. In retrospect, Retro essentially pulled the Make a Common Pest Bigger card to add a level of grotesqueness and creepiness. Think about it. The space pirates would be dealing with parasites like we do mice in our homes. It's like enlarging a massive rat that gains all new phenotypical terrors and genetic modifications that enhance it. Moving on further, it feels like malice is continuing to press in on us. Doors have been sealed to prevent radiation leaks. There are other parasite queens, one currently in incubation in the same room as us. And to top all this apprehension and anxiety off, we also have ventilation shafts that look like they can open at will, teeming with entirely new threats. Or just plain explode. The detail of this game is just mind-splitting. Especially this opening sequence. Here we are. Biohazard containment. The next real scare of Frigate Orpheon. Certainly more so than Biotech Research Area 1. This room is iconic. It is the resting place of a skeletonized parasite queen. Just this room is an ode to the dripping detail in Prime's introductory sequence, as it by itself has its own story. A story of genetic mutation gone awry through Phazon Batch 0732.C. The only thing that breaks the fear and apprehension of this room and the urge to turn back and take a break are the specimens from Talon 4 in suspended animation, awaiting our curiosity. This is also an area in the game that gives first-time players insights into the Metroid story as a whole. One mega important pirate entry says that Zebes has fallen, and that the hunter, clad in metal, killed their forces, as well as the detonating facilities. First-time players won't know which game this is, so I will keep silent. The other interesting scan we find concerns a xenotropic life form. This is a bioform that begins with an H and can be found in older Metroid games as well as a certain game called Metroid 4 for the Game Boy Advance. The story continues upstairs. Here we are invited to some new specimens and another pirate. This one with brain hemorrhaging. Then a pirate without hindrance. Kill him! After finishing off our first very real threat, we see that there are variants of aliens from the first deck, something we can easily miss with our consistent anxiety about our environment. Another space pirate with disabled legs, welded by acid. Making our way down the next access hall, we see another set of engineering scans. The first informs us that the vent covers we saw earlier could explode if airflow is restricted. The other scan is much more dreaded. Apparently, there is an object obstructing the ventilation system in the reactor core. And judging by our map, that has to be the large circular room that we've been funneled to. The freight lift corridor becomes obvious when we pass through the next door and terminate the security turret. We observe that a parasite queen must have killed another pirate, but it's difficult to tell which direction it came from and where it went. There are huge gouges out of the flooring where its galvanized limbs must have pierced. Down into the transport we go. With a sweet opening animation. Boom! We're ambushed. After taking him out, we see more green splattered across the floors. Scanning these dead enemies reveals that their post-mortems are becoming alarmingly specific. To up the fear and play with your imagination. After passing through pirate security that seems to have been designed to allow Samus's entry, we see 4 bodies in particular that also tell a story. The first had his face melted off by acid. The second one was sliced by a queen arm. The third was subsequently bashed in the head, probably by the queen's arm or carapace, while the fourth likely died via being crushed by the tail as he tried to escape through the door we just came through. Oh wait, there are actually 5 bodies. Jeesh, talk about all these easily missed details. After stumbling upon our first save station, that is, if we decided to actually take the side door first instead of heading into the large door. We then enter into the Abyss, the largest room on our map. This moment is so easy to miss, and it's glossed right over by so many players. But let's take in this moment to truly analyze this mess of bodies. If this blood were red, I would have probably been utterly repulsed by this bloodbath as a child. Scans indicate this pile is a source of nourishment for something much larger. Cutscene. Here we go. Now, right around this point on my first time, I would have turned the music down or off. I never remember it being off for the next section, so I must have re-enabled it. Scanning the Queen, we discovered just how useful the scanning mechanic will actually be in this game. It tells us that the Queen has a specific weakness on its body, and that we should lock on to that to deal damage. The end of the scan confirms that this is indeed a creation of the space pirates. I'm pretty sure I died from this boss at least once or twice my first try. The force fields surrounding and protecting this clever girl act symbiotically. The Queen is contained, but feels larger and more integrated with the ship because of it. And that just increases the potency of the living death trap interstellar graveyard that frigate Orpheon is. The gigantic, piercing lead sound instills terror into the heart of any player. It's surreal how it takes exponentially longer to conjure up impressions and snippets of memories from so long ago. Oh no. The Queen fell into the reactor core. This is the most alive you will feel in Frigate Orpheon. The music puts the pressure on. It's disjointed and erratic, as if the instruments themselves are responding in kind with your situation. The hi-hat especially sounds like it wants to rattle right off its stand and into oblivion. Rather than an annoyance, the alarm sound is a musical part of the track. The elevators don't lift fast enough. Turrets smother your face in energy blasts. The space pirates are intent on escaping as well, and they effectively nuke the last remaining parasite queen, decimating themselves in the process. It makes you wonder if they realized that was coming, or if there was some kind of excess energy buildup that detonated the tank. We fight uninhibited pirates to the death. There's this rising melody that sounds like a watch is despairing as you have little time to escape. Making our way to that same ventilation cap from earlier, it spells the demise of our last obstacle. This is where I always entered morphball mode, as my TV screen was so dark and rolling around was much faster for me. It's likely I simply felt safer. especially with the hordes of parasites bearing down on my not-so-impenetrable armor shields. We're almost killed by a massive piston, and the only way of escape is to roll toward it. Another cutscene? Another boss? Just when we thought Frigate Orpheon gave us everything, we witness a space dragon pterodactyl cyborg break free from its restraints, soaring above us rather than melting us. What is going on in this sci-fi hell? What's this? We can swing? We all fell the first time. Gather up the scans. Gather up the scans. Scan this elevator console. What? We slam against a wall, and our system is damaged. And we lose all these power-ups except the ability to shoot and jump. Talk about starting from square one. Gotta run through this maze-like corridor. That door is ablaze, not that way. We have to wait for this to repress. Shoot the door, open, now. Thank goodness. There's Ridley. Let's go, come on. Let's go. We seem fast enough. Why are we slowing down? We engage Ridley, but he is allowed to escape. Descending on Talon 4 for ground assault is the only option. Tearing through a rainstorm, the wind breaking against the H.R. Geiger-esque underside of our gunship. We descend to a lush world of unexpected beauty. I asked a question earlier. Why do we need to be so intimately close to something designed to be so intentionally organic, detailed, twitchy, and frighteningly unpredictable? This, my friends, is given one of the most innovative and gorgeous answers in gaming history. So what is it about Metroid Prime that is more appealing than other experiences from the first-person perspective? It's the game's constant propensity to outdo itself in variety of gameplay mechanics, depth of exploration, and atmosphere, such as when we backtrack to previous areas, in the engrossing lore on behalf of the space pirates and Chozo alike. You are invited into an unknown world, and you get to have a relationship with the game and all that that entails. The anticipation of what functionality will be added to your suit next is mesmerizing. You can scarcely imagine what technologies await you. Diving back into this section in minute detail has amounted to reliving my childhood memories as an 8-year-old all over again. I tried to somewhat capture how I played the game on my first run-through, and I still remember not wanting to come off the stairs in the evacuation room, turning off the music by the time I got to the Parasite Queen, and then likely dying at some point during the escape sequence because my TV was too dark at the time. It's made clear throughout the game that Samus, even reduced to her power suit alone, is still technologically beyond the space pirates. The Chozo were far ahead of their time, demigods of the galaxy.